Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I can't think of a better place to talk to you in than a place that's named after Huguette Laballe, a distinguished Canadian whom I got to know well. You know that she was chancellor of this great university, and you might know that she also, for 6 or 7 years, headed up a major international institution, CETA. You might not know that she was on the board of directors of the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and that's where we met. And that's where I learned from her and from other members of that wonderful institute, headquartered, by the way, in my home city of Winnipeg, that the conversation of resource development and environmental protection is one conversation, and the work that she did with us at IASD, at CETA, and at this university is the reason that someone had the good sense to name a room after her, and I'm just honored to be able to speak to you in her room. And thank you, Monica. You did a whoopee when I was elected. I had no idea what was going on in my life, I can tell you. There are two things for which there is absolutely no preparation in life and no manual. One is parenthood, and the other is being a minister. People can tell you what it's like. Their kids weren't the same, but you might want to follow this strategy or another, and then friends in the cabinet will tell you you should expect a heavy workload, but nothing can prepare you for the reality of it. And I also remember some serious conversations that you and I have had over the years about energy development in Canada, and the wisdom and the balance that you bring in such perfect bilingualism is something that I cherish. And thank you for the invitation to spend a few minutes with you. And also to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. That's significant for a couple of reasons. First, such acknowledgements remind us that this nation's first people were also this land's first protectors. And an Indigenous proverb says, "We do not inherit this land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children." And I would say we do both, because we have an obligation from those who came before 7 generations to leave this land and our relationship with the land, the air, and the water better than we found it for the 7 generations that follow. And also the Algonquin connection reminds us of our earliest roots as a trading nation. The city of Ottawa takes its name from the Algonquin word for trade, a nod to the days when the nearby shores of the Ottawa River were a place for Indigenous people to meet and to barter. All of this goes to the heart of our government's own vision for Canada in this clean growth century. A vision built on economic prosperity, environmental protection, and Indigenous partnerships. And this great country is well positioned to realize that vision and to lead the global transition to a low-carbon economy with our abundance of natural resources, our experience and know-how in developing them, and our history as free traders. But first, we have to restore public confidence. And that's why I open by saying this conference is both important and timely. Public confidence in energy decision-making is not just a well-chosen theme or a compelling research project. It's critical to our future, rallying Canadians in common cause and in shared purpose. Unfortunately, as Monica's opinion research has found, Canadians' confidence in the country's energy system has slipped. There are still those who think we have to sacrifice the economy to protect the environment, or vice versa. We set about to show Canadians that the economy and the environment are mutually reinforcing objectives. Less than 3 months into our mandate, we introduced an interim set of principles for reviewing major resource projects, an approach aimed at maintaining investor certainty, expanding public consultations, and enhancing Indigenous engagement. And next, we went to work with the provinces and territories and in consultation with Indigenous peoples to develop a national plan that drives economic growth as we combat a changing climate. The Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change is that plan, an ambitious blueprint to create good jobs and meet our international commitments in the Paris Agreement. In lockstep with that, we also announced the single largest investment in Canada's history to protect our oceans, the Ocean Protection Plan, a $1.5 billion investment that protects our coasts, makes navigation safer, and strengthens our capacity to respond in the unlikely event of an oil spill. And we didn't stop there. We launched Generation Energy, Canada's largest national discussion on energy in our nation's history. We invited Canadians to imagine our energy future, and they responded by the hundreds of thousands. 380,000 people took the time to offer an opinion to us on what Canada's energy mix should look like in a generation. 350,000 Canadians and 30,000 people from around the world. And hundreds traveled to my home city of Winnipeg for a 2-day Generation Energy Forum last fall. Monica was there as our MC. She saw it, she heard it. Suddenly, people who may never have spoken to each other before were now in the same room, challenging each other and themselves. And at the end of the 2 days, when I delivered some sum-up remarks, I asked people in the audience to put up their hands if they had experienced any moment of discomfort during the last 2 days. Every single hand in the room went up. Everybody was uncomfortable at one stage or another. And I said, what a good thing that is. If we're all in our comfort zone, we are not learning, and we are not understanding that we have to move together. In spite of the different places where we may start the journey, we believe there's a consensus on where we're wanting to go together. Years from now, Canadians may well look back and say that Generation Energy was a turning point, that it marked our emergence as a clean growth leader. We're now taking that optimism to create a Canadian energy strategy. Many of you in this room probably have some idea of how it began. David Runnels knows, because he was the president of IISD. I was president of the Business Council of Manitoba, and Roger Gibbons was president of the Canada West Foundation, and we all sat on each other's boards. And after we witnessed President Obama come to Ottawa and ask President Harper to engage in a continental dialogue about clean energy, we kind of scratched our heads simultaneously and said, well, what's the Canadian energy strategy that we will take to have a conversation with the American president? And the answer was, we didn't have a Canadian energy strategy. So we made some phone calls, and 9 CEOs of the leading think tanks in Canada came to, guess where? Winnipeg, at the corner of Portage and Main. I'll save Go Jets Go for the end. And we were able to crank out something called the Winnipeg Consensus that in itself became the Canadian energy strategy that was championed by the premiers through the Council of the Federation. An interesting study, by the way, for academics in the room on how public policy can be developed outside of government. And now government's embracing what we believe to be a common objective for the country. So what were some of the things that have been done lately? Well, and what are those things that we think will be a part of where we move from here? Leveraging the fossil fuel resources we have today to deliver clean energy solutions for tomorrow. Advancing shared priorities to use more renewables and promote energy efficiency. Linking those provinces who have an abundance of clean electricity with those who are trying to get there. All of these things I've just talked about are captured in the spirit of Bill C-69, which strengthens the way environmental assessments and regulatory reviews are carried out, with better rules to restore public trust, advance Indigenous reconciliation, protect our environment, and encourage new investments. I know that some of you in the room aren't thrilled with all of those clauses in our legislation, but you also know that our minds have been open and that we're always looking at ways to make the bill stronger understanding that the objective within the bill is to make it clearer and more predictable for investors and to have a thorough impact assessment made to do what we want to do always, and that is to create good jobs, allow good projects to go through while protecting our environment. A new approach that starts really with some key changes. First, we are establishing
Okay. Thank you. I know. I just have one little thing to say, and I thank you for inviting me in. Yep, I appreciate that. Buju bidno nimki kwe dijnakaz kikunang donjaba Anishinaabe kwe nindao majike odem. So, if you need a translation, my name is Early Morning Thunder Woman. I'm from the Kettle and Stony Point First Nation in Ontario. I'm a Turtle Clan, and I'm Anishinaabe from Ontario. And I have been in several energy meetings. I've been in several rooms talking about bitumen, about pipelines. I have a friend that is in Peace River, blocking the dam that is going through their traditional territories. I have friends that are still standing at the Oglala Nations, trying to prevent work from being done in our sacred sites. This is Turtle Island. This is an Anishinaabe nation. You don't actually have any authority to do any of the work that you're doing. And by the duty to consult of the Crown as the rightful heir to the Crown, I feel like you don't have any right to be on any of our lands. You can check my lineage, Samantha Elijah, as a heir to Jesus Christ. I think I have the authority to block any more work from being done in our lands. So if you want to follow me to, let's go to Supreme Court, I can prove that all the work that you're doing in our lands are illegal and should be ceased immediately. And I hope that there's a press conference following this, because I can back up the research that I've done on my lineage as the rightful heir to the Crown. That means that you have the duty to consult with me. And I feel like that is enough authority in any Canadian government to deal with. Thank you. I have paperwork. If anybody wants to see me, I'll be over there. So you guys, I'll be seeing you in court, and you won't be having any more of your developments in any of our territories any longer. Miigwech.
Thank you. So, are we feeling uncomfortable yet? This is precisely the reason that positive energy exists. Clearly, we are facing some very substantial challenges in this country around different ways of thinking about energy, different ways of thinking about how we make decisions when it comes to energy projects. This is what we're here for. This is what we've been trying to do and work on for the last 3 years. So we would like to thank those who just expressed their opinions, thank them for doing so in a peaceful, respectful fashion. I would like to give the minister an opportunity if he has some remarks he'd like to make in response to that. And then we also would like to take a few questions. I know the minister has to get back to the House for a vote, but all of you here in this room may have some questions that you want to ask of the minister, and he has graciously agreed to respond to questions. Minister.
In 1906, all 4 of my grandparents came to Canada. They were escaping the pogroms of the Tsar. They couldn't be who they were. The thought that they could arrive at a public meeting, like this one, and take a microphone and explain to the people who were in the room how they had suffered through racism, through humiliation, through the horrible indignities of being a religious minority. That's why they came to Canada. And the fact that we are in this room at a university and we understand the power of the freedom of speech And the power of the sharing of experiences one to the other is the reason that Canada is such a great country. I would have finished my speech talking about Bill C-69. I would have spoken about the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline. I would have talked about the historic consultation with Indigenous peoples. I would have talked about how important it is to protect the land, the air, and the water. And I would have closed with a sense of optimism about where our country is and where it can be. This conversation about the future of our energy mix is not something that is a Canadian chat. It's all over the world. Wherever we go, whether it's in Europe or Latin America or in Asia, the conversation is about the transition to a low-carbon economy and ways in which nation states are choosing to get there with the trajectory and the pace absolutely unknown. And people look to Canada and they see in us a model nation to lead because of the abundance of resources we have, because of our capacity to innovate, because of the power of our entrepreneurship, because of our political system and its stability, because we live under the rule of law, and because how we include all of our people in the decisions we make. So I will end on that optimistic note and be happy to take any of your questions. I'd be glad to take your questions if you have a few.
My question, coming from Attawapiskat First Nation, where we have the first diamond mine in Ontario, Chisasibi First Nation, where you have used our water resource. We have much difficulties on our lands because of the raping of Mother Earth. And you have left us to clean up your mess. Nina noachamagonak, Nina joashamishak, gahosichik. It is my children, it is my relatives that have been left with much illness, such as cancer, from the contamination. And there is never a holistic cleanup, not physically, not mentally, not emotionally, and not spiritually. And you have a sign up there that says positive energy, and I understand it a different way. Back there, you're serving alcohol. We understand the alcohol as a spirit, an alcohol spirit. So we have already started off with on the wrong foot. And you're here on our lands. Many of your people's spirit is in the bottle, the alcohol spirit. So it's not happening in a good way. Positive energy needs to come from a clear mind. So how are you going to address the contamination to Ogawi Mawaski? Minister Carr?
Minister? I see another question coming forward. If you could identify yourself, please.
Good evening. My name is Jacob Irving. I'm the president of the Energy Council of Canada. I wanted to ask you, in a world that is often marked by energy poverty, people, countries around the world who don't have enough energy, who do not have an abundance of choices, who look to Canada to help solve their energy problems, how can we do a better job of translating that message back to Canadians when we look at our own choices? How come in Canada the conversation of global energy poverty isn't higher up on the agenda than we see?
Because we don't talk about it enough. At international energy meetings for the last number of months, and there will be more coming up now, I'm encouraging the International Energy Agency to talk about a global energy strategy. We've talked about a Canadian strategy and a continental one. And in my conversations with Secretary Perry and Secretary Joaquin Coldwell, we talk about the importance of establishing a regional bloc in North America. But a global energy strategy will give credit and take into account how one nation is helping the developing world get off GHG production that is very harmful to their communities and their society. So this is ambitious. It's challenging enough within any nation state to agree on an energy strategy for that state, so to do it internationally is that much more complex, but I think it's inevitable and it's important because as we commit ourselves as Canadians through the Paris Agreement and through other ways to contributing to an international effort, I think we also have to be acknowledged in Canada when we establish a set of policies and a set of trading relationships and the establishment of global routes where we are contributing to the energy policies of other countries in a way that's positive for the world. So I agree with the premise of your question. In our own way, we're advancing those values, and I'm glad you gave me a chance to say so.
The minister has to head out, so I'm terribly sorry. There are a few more questions here. We would have loved to get to them, but I'm being told that you have a vote to return to at the House. Thank you so much, Minister, for some thought-provoking remarks, and I'd like to invite everybody to join me in thanking you for your time here with us today.